At night, the cities hum as if an animal was sleeping. Freight cars clatter through the dark. Office towers keep one eye open. In the quiet floors above reception, there are signatures drying, covenants clicking into place, and debt settling over a company like fresh snow. The thing with many names, private equity, buyout funds, sponsors, keeps feeding. It does not roar. It eats by contract. Private equity begins with a simple design. Limited partners, pensions and endowments, and sovereign funds, pool capital. General partners promise to hunt for returns, take a management fee with every tick of the clock, and claim a carried interest, a share of the profits, if the hunt goes well. The machine works by leverage. The fund buys a company, and the company borrows much of the purchase price itself, so the risk lives where the cash flows live. The interest bill sharpens the mind. The tax code lightens the load when interest is deductible, the old debt tax shield that turns borrowing into a subsidy. In the United States, the limit sits under Section 163, where the deduction is capped as a slice of adjusted income, a rule rewritten after the Tax Act of 2017 to be sterner as of 2022. The shape of the rule changes, but the principle survives, and leveraged deals continue to draw nourishment from it. The river that fed this creature was opened by policy. In the late 1970s, the guardians of retirement money relaxed the way they read prudence. The Department of Labor told plan fiduciaries that diversified, professionally managed funds could, in some measured way, include private equity, and over the decades pensions did, especially the great defined benefit plans. In 2020, the department said a similar thing for certain target date and balance funds inside defined contribution plans, a doorway for ordinary workers' savings to trickle toward private markets, a door that regulators opened cautiously, shut partway, and in this present season have been told to open wide again. Each letter, each supplemental statement is another inch of floodgate. History added octane. In the 1980s, junk bonds built by Michael Milken at Drexel Burnham Lambert financed the modern leveraged buyout. The RJR Nabisco battle, a number scrawled in the air like a dare, taught corporate America that debt could be a sword rather than a shackle. That lesson crossed the Atlantic to a city remade by the Big Bang of deregulation and governed by a code that tells boards to stay neutral in a fight. In London, the Takeover Code's rule on frustrating actions makes it hard to swallow a poison pill. In Delaware, boards may entrench. In the United Kingdom, they must mostly step aside and let owners decide. The path into British companies is straighter, and private equity, which loves a straight path, used it. Debt did not stay in vaults. Banks originated, then distributed. The loans were sliced and packed into collateralized loan obligations, those many-layered towers of claims that whistle in fair weather and creak in a storm. Over the last decade, leveraged loans and the CLOs that feed on them became the circulatory system of the buyout world. Supervisors at Basel and analysts in New York combed the numbers and warned about data gaps and leverage layered on leverage. At times, defaults rose like weeds after rain, and the Bank of England voiced its worry about the link between these loans and the private equity portfolio companies that depend on them. None of it stopped the machine. It only taught it to look for new arteries, private credit funds that lend from outside the banking system and often lend faster. What is the promise that keeps the river flowing? It is the promise that concentrated ownership and sharp incentives can fix sleepy enterprises. When it works, the result can be astonishing. In 2007, Blackstone bought Hilton as the world began to tilt into crisis, and still nurtured it into an offering 6 years later that grew into one of the most profitable trades in the firm's history. In 2006, KKR and Partners bought HCA, the sprawling hospital chain, then took it public again after extracting cost discipline and scale efficiencies. The argument, made by people like Josh Lerner at Harvard and relayed in industry reviews by Bain and McKinsey, is that private ownership frees management from the tyranny of quarters, aligns capital with strategy, and can professionalize a business that public markets undervalued. There are days when this is not a story. It is a balance sheet that sings. But the ledger has 2 columns. There are children's aisles that will never see new bikes because the debt was too heavy. Toys R Us, loaded in 2005 and toppled in 2017, showed how a retail chain can survive competition, but not a balance sheet that demands its pound of flesh. There are hospitals where the bill grows faster than the medicine. Researchers writing in JAMA found that physician practices acquired by private equity raised prices and increased certain measures of utilization after acquisition. Nursing homes tell an even colder tale. Economists have documented quality declines under some buyouts, while other studies, older and narrower, saw ambiguous effects. The truth is not a slogan, it is variance. In healthcare, the variance touches human breath. Cross the Atlantic and enter a care home in Sunderland or Inverness. The beds are clean, the staff works past fatigue, and the rent is due to a landlord created by a sale and leaseback that once delivered cash to the sponsor. Southern Cross collapsed in 2011 after just such alchemy. The real estate sold, the operator left with payments it could not bear. Four Seasons Healthcare stumbled into administration years later, a tangle of debt and promises. In both sagas, the British taxpayer and vulnerable families became involuntary counterparties to a spreadsheet logic. The smell of antiseptic is the same, the capital stack is not. Walk Oxford Street after closing. The mannequins do not blink. Debenhams tells the retail version of the story. A buyout in the early 2000s. A float back to market that harvested gains. A portfolio of stores encumbered by deals that extracted cash and left operating leverage where shoppers could feel it. When footfall shifted, the structure had no give. The lights went out. The lesson drips from the shutters. Financial engineering can create value for the owners of equity precisely by draining the resilience of the operating company. A transfer that is legal, elegant, and ruthless. In boardrooms and credit committees, the incentives are lines in a ledger. 2 and 20 pays regardless of weather, though the carry only flows when the sun comes out. Carried interest, in both the United States and the United Kingdom, enjoys capital gains treatment, subject to special holding rules and exceptions, a policy that has survived many reformers. Bankers take underwriting fees, and then pass the parcel to CLOs and funds. Lawyers pass covenants into lace. Rating analysts count add-backs like day-old coins. This is not a conspiracy, it is a system of toll booths. What enables all this to grow is not only policy and tax, it is also psychology. Set a target, EBITDA, margin, same-store sales, and Goodhart's law arrives with its polite English smile. When a measure becomes a target, it can stop being a measure. Costs move below the line. Capital expenditure is delayed. Leases become someone else's problem. On the investor side, prospect theory whispers in bullish ears. Losses weigh more than gains, so sponsors will lever a little harder to avoid admitting defeat. And allocators who fear missing out will follow the capital into the same cul-de-sacs, telling themselves they are diversified because the names are different while the bets are the same. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky wrote the mathematics of that whisper nearly half a century ago. The whisper is loud on Park Avenue. Look closer at the wiring. Dividend recapitalizations let owners take cash out without selling by asking the company to borrow and pay them. J. Crew paid hundreds of millions in dividends and later shifted intellectual property outside the reach of certain creditors. The maneuver that investment folks still call the J. Crew trapdoor. Neiman Marcus moved its crown jewel, My Teresa, into a safer room before the rest of the house burned, and litigation rolled like thunder across the capital structure until a bankruptcy court brokered peace. In the grey zone of permissive documents, creativity blooms. The garden smells of smoke. Why America and the United Kingdom? Because their corporate law speaks the language of markets. Britain's non-frustration rule keeps boards from blocking bidders. The United States permits poison pills but also nurtures a buyout bar and a financing complex unmatched in its speed and scale. Both countries turned retirement savings into patient, if fee-bearing, fuel. The Mansion House project in Britain prods defined contribution plans toward illiquid assets, and the regulator created the long-term asset fund to carry such holdings. In Washington, the regulator's letters about private equity inside target date funds signaled comfort, caution, and then fresh comfort again. When nations invite the river to flow, the river comes. There is a symbiosis now between private equity and private credit, those funds that lend where banks retreat. The Bank for International Settlements and the European Central Bank describe a world of interlocking balances, where banks still fund the lenders and lenders fund the companies, and opacity is a feature as much as a bug. In a low-rate decade, private credit taught sponsors that they could refinance with a phone call. In this higher-rate era, it teaches them that relationships can matter more than price. On good days, it is flexibility. On bad days, it is a forest of dry timber. Who benefits? When the wheel turns well, the beneficiaries are many. University endowments that finance scholarships. Firefighters' pensions that pay each month's check. Operators who wanted an owner brave enough to invest and quick enough to cut what needed cutting. The Hilton story has names and careers and communities that surfaced stronger. The Boots story in Britain, taken private by KKR and later combined with Walgreens, delivered scale that a fragmented chemist trade could not match alone. But the other column will not look away. There are care workers whose hours shrank to make a coverage ratio whole. There are vendors paid more slowly so a dividend could be on time. There are towns where a store that paid taxes for 50 years is now a distribution hub with half the staff and a third of the wage bill. The employment arithmetic, done by Stephen Davis and his co-authors following hundreds of buyouts, tells a textured story. Employment falls more at targets than at comparable firms in the early years. Then churn increases and productivity measures improve, with job creation at new establishments partly offsetting losses at old ones. Eileen Applebaum and Rosemary Batt, surveying the field, argue that the value created is often a transfer from workers and creditors to owners, a claim hotly disputed by the industry's advocates. Between the papers and the position letters runs a road paved with methodology and ideology. On that road walk real people with name badges. Healthcare is where the contradictions grow claws. Studies of physician practices and certain hospital acquisitions associate private equity ownership with higher negotiated prices and hints of upcoding, while some sponsors reply that they brought scale, technology, and professional procurement to small offices that could not survive consolidation elsewhere. The truth is not kind enough to pick a single side. It picks at details. In nursing homes, one carefully designed study tied private equity ownership to worse outcomes, while other work, years earlier, saw little change. In the end, the quality of the operator matters, the weight of the rent matters, the patience of capital matters, and the distance between the spreadsheet and the bedside matters most of all. If the creature is eating America and the United Kingdom, then it is because we set the table. We taught our retirement systems to hunt returns and underfunded them for years, then begged them to earn the difference. We allowed interest to be deductible and then only trimmed it at the margin. We built legal systems that respect contracts more than complaints and stock exchanges that punish any executive who misses a whisper number by a penny. We believed, as a culture, that efficiency is virtuous and redundancy is waste. Private equity is not an invader from another planet. It is the mirror of our choices. So what should a citizen investor learn? First, that leverage is not a moral category. It is a weather pattern. Sail under it knowingly. If a fund strategy depends on covenant-like tolerance and rolling waves of refinancing, understand that this is a promise made to a new kind of lender who is your partner until the day they are not. Second, that incentives right behavior. If the target is EBITDA, expect the world to shift, so EBITDA rises. Remember Goodhart's law, born in a 1970s paper in Australia and repeated by generations of economists, and ask what is being gained when a measure moves. Third, that alignment is precious. The best sponsors are not saints, they are craftsmen. They choose when to take the dividend and when to leave the cash in the till. They write incentives for managers that point down the road, not to the corner. There are ways for policy to turn the temperature down without freezing the market. Transparency about ownership, fees, and debt covenants helps buyers of loans and residents of care homes alike. Bankruptcy judges who raise an eyebrow at clever transfers of assets away from creditors enforce the rules of a hard game. Tax codes that stop subsidizing pure financial extraction without choking real investment can make the arithmetic less lopsided. Supervisors who map the connections between banks and private funds make it harder for dry timber to go up in one spark. None of these changes require demonizing the tool. They require respecting the material. Stand at the edge of the Hudson or the Thames at dusk and watch the money move like tidewater. The private equity house lights across the river are steady, their lobbies quiet, their conference rooms warm. Inside, there is nothing supernatural, only a technology of ownership that is very good at using the rules we wrote. If the creature is eating, it is because we serve a buffet of companies, with margins to squeeze, with real estate to sell, with brands to monetize, and with customers who keep showing up even after the store has changed its bones. In the oldest markets of London, there is a custom as old as guilds. Trust, but tally. The tinsmith who sold your grandfather a hinge is the tinsmith who will fix tomorrow's gate, so the accounts matter and the reputation matters more. Private equity can be that tinsmith when it chooses, a patient owner who brings tools and leaves a better door. It can also be a passerby with a bag and a clock. The difference lives in documents and in the conscience of capital, and in the eyes of the citizens who remember that money is a servant, not a master. The cities keep humming. The signatures keep drying. Somewhere between the ledger and the ward, between the distribution and the dividend, a country decides what it is willing to sell in order to own a future. If the choice is to invite the creature to the table, then choose to feed it with terms that nourish the household too. The house, after all, is us.